Things got pretty lively in our town during Halloween. The families would put a considerable amount of effort into setting up props for the occasion. The flashier, the better. They would often overdo it just for the bragging rights. As a result, children from our neighboring towns would also visit our vicinity and join the trick-or-treat. We would get acquainted with the other kids that we didn't usually see, but there were also a bunch of naughty ones which we would rather avoid. In general, the Halloween celebration in our town was meant for all the kids to roam outside and enjoy the night. During this yearly event, all of us get excited and thrilled. We always expected to get spooked by the props and delighted by the treats. However, there was one particular night when we got spooked out of our minds for a different reason. Although most households were into the spirit of Halloween to entertain the kids and impress their neighbors, there were also some who straight out just wanted to scare the hell out of everyone and just go a bit overboard. For the houses at the far side of the town and closest to the woods, they were infamous for putting up props that were too realistic for the theme. This row of properties was known for causing a stir in our community during Halloween and initially received complaints for their disturbingly believable displays. Along with pumpkin heads and neon lights, the dead bodies and decapitated parts incorporated with their designs often made their front yards look like legitimate crime scenes. For us kids who were also in it for a good scare, going there was always one of the highlights of the night. It was my little brother Cade's first time to trick-or-treat in that particular night, and we went with my friends to collect our treats. Cade was very intrigued by the spookiest area of the town since my friends were talking about it since the beginning. And so we decided to go there much earlier than we usually did. And just as we were expecting, the plastic skeletons and goblin figures from our nearer neighbors were nothing compared to that part of the vicinity. There were body bags over the lawn that were tainted with real-looking blood, and there were even automatons of amputated arms and legs that looked like someone was buried under the grass. Unfortunately, these disturbing props were too scary for Cade. We just passed by them without getting a chance to collect the treats at the porches. At the last house in this row, there was a decapitated head on the yard that moved when Cade passed by. He got too terrified and ran into the woods nearby. We chased after my brother until we saw him standing on the old cabin that was far from the other homes. We knew that the cabin was long since abandoned by the owner who already passed away. Aside from the dangers of encountering a wild animal, no kid ever went this far into the woods since we were aware that nobody was there. Oddly enough, there were some props in front of the cabin without any lights to illuminate the property. There were disembodied remains on the doorway, and a life-size mannequin of a child in Halloween costume was propped up right next to them. It was possible that a fellow resident had set it up, especially since the households closest to the cabin were known to pull off these kinds of baffling things. The guts and other innards on the ground also belonged to their signature theme, and so we assumed that it was them. I walked towards Cade and told him that we should head back since it was really dark out there, but he told me that he saw the mannequin move. Me and my friends just giggled and said that it was just a prop, and so we were taken aback when it suddenly turned its head towards us. What we thought was a mannequin was an actual kid, and it slowly approached us while we were still completely dumbfounded. Cade was the first one who was not spooked and greeted her instead. Her entire body was practically covered with her layered costume. It was one of the reasons why we didn't think that it was an actual child. She was wearing a blood-stained white dress with a black hooded robe and a devil mask. She was also carrying a basket, but it was still empty. When we got back to our senses, we assumed that the girl must be from another town and got lost when she was trick-or-treating on her own. We asked her what she was doing there, but she did not respond. Judging by her height, it looked like she was also around my little brother's age. We decided to invite her to come with us, and she willingly tagged along without saying a single word. We went to the other houses in our vicinity to collect our candies, and I could tell that Cade was having more fun since the random kid went with us. I thought that it was probably because he was hanging out with someone of the same age. She never responded to any of our inquiries, and so we assumed that she was either too shy to talk, a foreigner, or a mute. It seemed that it was also the first time for her to go trick-or-treating. When she got a chocolate bar as her first treat, she ate it right away and finished the entire thing under her mask. She developed a strong preference for it. Whenever she received a treat that was not a chocolate, she would just put it in her basket and ignore it. And at times when she did, she munched on them immediately while skillfully hiding her face the entire time. After a few hours of roaming around our town, our bags were already almost full with candies and other treats. Unfortunately, we came across the group of older kids that we were trying to avoid. This group of boys were from a neighboring town, and they were known to bully the other kids that were younger than them. They surrounded us while riding their bikes back and forth. They blocked our path and demanded that we give them the candy that we had collected. I wanted to refuse, but I was afraid that my brother might get hurt. We couldn't outrun them, and there was no adult out on the street that we could ask for help. When I was about to propose that we would give them our collection of treats if they would let my little brother and his new friend keep theirs, one of the bikers swerved too close to Cade and tried to snatch his bag from his hands. My brother fell on the ground as he almost got dragged when the bully grabbed the strap. I got really mad and was about to throw punches at the boy that was also older than me at the time, but then all of us were distracted by the noise of a clanging metal and a scream. One of the boys just suddenly disappeared, and his bike was sent several feet away across the street. It was severely deformed as if it was hit by a rushing truck, and there was a small trail of blood on the same direction which it flew off to. We were all looking at Cade when he fell on the ground, and the only person who saw what happened was screaming his heart out. Extremely frightened and obviously traumatized, the boy rode his bike away from us as fast as he could, and his other friends frantically followed while trying to ask him about what he saw. Out of curiosity, we followed the trail of blood after the bullies left, and we were shaken down to our bones when we discovered the boy's dead body leaned against a tree several meters away from where we were. There was a gaping hole in his chest as if he was hit by a slug shotgun point blank. If it wasn't for the tree, he would probably be thrown even further. We all decided to head home after what we just saw. We agreed to send the little girl off first to make sure that she was safe. But when we asked her which direction her home was, she just pointed to the woods. Although we were quite confused, we just followed her lead and walked past the cabin where we first saw her. Along the trail, I saw a shoe that belonged to an adult, and it was covered in blood. After seeing the boy's dead body, I could no longer tell if what I was seeing was real or just a Halloween prop. Eventually, the horrifying truth was revealed when we saw the young girl's father. Some of my friends wanted to turn back when we realized that we were already deep into the woods. I was also worried for my little brother since a wild animal might attack us, but I was also concerned for the young girl's safety. I assumed that her home must be somewhere we had not been before, but she suddenly stopped walking when we arrived at a swamp. The little girl handed the basket of sweets that she collected to my brother, and then she turned to her back to face the swamp. I was about to ask her where she was heading, but then we heard a sound coming from beneath the mire. We were all frightened to the core by what appeared right in front of us. My knees wobbled out of fear, and I was glued to the ground with my eyes wide open. A giant freak of nature with unnaturally thick muscular physique came out from the pool of mud, and the young girl sat right on its shoulder like a perching bird. His skin was as green as mold, and his teeth were protruding from his mouth. I couldn't believe what I was seeing as an ogre was standing right in front of us. The young girl removed her mask and waved her hand to say goodbye, and her facial features were similar to his. It was then when things began to add up. She was the only one facing the boy who was launched off the ground with a hole in his chest, and she seemed unaffected when we discovered his body. He probably tried to take her basket of treats from her as well, and it was her horrific strength that killed him. We were with a young monster all along, and the only person who was able to wave back at her was my little brother Cade as they were walking away. It seemed that he knew what she was all this time. On the following day, the authorities confirmed that the innards we saw in front of the cabin were not props. They were the remains of an old man who was known to be aggressively unfriendly towards children. Knowing who he was, he probably did something that agitated the young ogre. Fortunately for us, we stayed on our good side until the night was over.